See you. We turn to this breaking news tonight. Major federal law enforcement initiative. It is named Operation Legend. Now, the program leverages key resources from the U.S. government to track down and arrest perpetrators responsible for unsolved murders. Now, it was named after a 4-year-old little boy, Legend Taliaferro, who was killed by gunfire while asleep in his bed. And breaking tonight, his suspected killer has now been taken, thankfully, into custody and charged with second-degree murder. Here with more, an exclusive one-on-one interview with the Attorney General of the United States. His first time on Hannity, sir. Thank you for being with us. This is huge.
Hi, Sean.
And thank God, it looks like we got our man.
Well, that's what we believe, and he's been charged with the murder. As you know, with the demonization of the police that has occurred recently, we've seen an upsurge in violence in many of our inner cities. And our response to that has been to work closely with state and local law enforcement who are willing to work closely with us in a number of cities, including Kansas City, to go after these violent criminals and stop this bloodshed. And we called it Operation Legend in honor of this 4-year-old boy who was shot. So he became a symbol of the black lives that were being lost in the inner city, the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds that have been killed with the demonization of the police. And today, I think the message is that in this particular case, our system worked. What happened is a symbol of the fact that the local law enforcement, in this case the Kansas City Police, working closely with the FBI and the U.S. Marshals, were able to find this man and charge him with murder. And that becomes a symbol of what we can do, and we can do it. What's involved here is the will to deal with this violent crime in the inner cities. It can be handled. We need the will.
I paid very close attention to your interview, and I thought, and so did many people. It was highly viewed with the great one I call him, Mark Levin, on Life, Liberty, and Levin. And you went into detail about, quote, a new form of urban guerrilla warfare and how demonstrations, and again, some are very peaceful protesters. There was universal outrage and shock and horror of the video of George Floyd. That can't happen, Mr. Attorney General, in this country, and I know you agree with that. But hijacking the demonstrations away from some peaceful protesters and provoking violence. We've seen over 2,000 cops injured, 14 now dead, rocks and bottles and bricks and Molotov cocktails, knives, hockey sticks, canes, frozen water bottles. I mean, it's now warfare against cops in this country in some of these cities, sir.
Well, that's absolutely right. You know, the legitimate demonstrations, the First Amendment activity, the protests in the wake of Mr. Floyd's death have long since given way to violent attacks, efforts to tear down the system, violent attacks on the police, on federal courts, on police precincts by a small group of radical violent extremists whose agenda has nothing to do with the death of George Floyd or protecting black lives, and everything to do with a very radical agenda and creating chaos and trying to tear down the system.
All right, Mr. Attorney General, stay there. We have a lot to ask you. An update on the Durham report. We want to ask you about this mail-in voting push and other important issues as it relates to the law. We'll get to that more with the Attorney General right after the break. Also,